Brân the Blessed, Welsh bendijfran or Bran Fendigod, literally blessed crow, is a giant and king of Britain in Welsh mythology. He appears in several of the Welsh triads, but his most significant role is in the second branch of the mabinogion, Branwen Ferchlier. He is a son of Liar and Penadun, and the brother of Branwen Manadun Nisian and Efnisian. The name Bran in Welsh is usually translated as crow or raven. The Irish king, Matholwch, sails to Harlech to speak with Brân the Blessed, High King of the Island of the Mighty, and to ask for the hand of his sister Branwen in marriage, thus forging an alliance between the two islands. Bran agrees to Matholwch's request, but the celebrations are cut short when Efnisian, a half-brother of Bran and Branwen, brutally mutilates Matholwch's horses, angry that his permission was not sought in regard to the marriage. Matholwch is deeply offended until Bran offers him compensation in the form of a magic cauldron that can restore the dead to life. Pleased with the gift, Matholwch and Branwen sail back to Ireland to reign. Once in Matholwch's kingdom, Branwen gives birth to a son, Bun, but Efnisian's insult continues to rankle among the Irish, and eventually Branwen is mistreated, banished to the kitchen, and beaten every day. She tames a starling and sends it across the Irish Sea with a message to her brother Bran. Bran wades across the Irish Sea to rescue her with his brother Manaladan and a huge host of warriors, mustered from the 154 countryside of Britain, following in ships. The Irish offer to make peace and build a house big enough to entertain Bran, but they hang 100 bags inside, supposedly containing flour, but actually containing armed warriors. Efnisian, suspecting treachery, reconnoiters the hall and kills the warriors by crushing their skulls. Later at the feast, Efnisian, again feeling insulted, murders Gwyn by burning him alive, and a vicious battle breaks out. Seeing that the Irish are using the cauldron to revive their dead, he hides among the Irish corpses and is thrown into the cauldron by the unwitting enemy. He destroys the cauldron from within, sacrificing himself in the process. Only 7 men survived the conflict, among them Manadun, Taliesin and Pryderi Fab Pual, Prince of Dyfed. Branwen, having herself died of a broken heart. The survivors are told by a mortally wounded Bran to cut off his head and to return it to Britain. For 7 years the 7 survivors stay in Harlech, where they are entertained by Bran's head, which continues to speak. They later move on to Gwales, often identified with Grasholm Island off Dyfed, where they live for 80 years without perceiving the passing of time. Eventually Highland Fab Gwyn opens the door of the hall facing Cornwall, and the sorrow of what had befallen them returns. As instructed, they take the now silent head to the Gwynfryn, the White Hill, thought to be the location where the Tower of London now stands, where they bury it facing France so as to ward off invasion. The imagery of the talking head is widely considered to derive from the ancient Celtic cult of the head. Head was considered the home of the soul. King Bran was sitting on the rocky shore at Harlech when he saw 13 ships over the horizon coming from southern Ireland. Soon the boatmen came to shore, declaring the fleet belonged to the Irish Lord Matholwch, who came seeking Bran's sister Branwen's hand in marriage. Of course, to Bran this union made sense. Someone worthy of his sister had come forth, and their union would bring forth a powerful alliance for the two kingdoms. Bran readily welcomed King Matholwch of Ireland ashore and gave him great hospitality. The wedding was decidedly set at the coast to a belfry. All this had to be set inside specially erected tents, since no house had yet been built that could accommodate the giant King Bran. Soon after all the wedding and celebration took place, Bran's half-brother Efnisian returned to Wales and was puzzled to see so many foreign horses stabled. He asked whom the horses belonged, and was enraged to find his sister had been given away without his consent. In his anger he maimed all the Irish horses by cutting their lips back to their gums, their ears down to their skulls, eyelids to eyeballs, and their tails to their rumps. Mathelwch's courtiers advised him to see this as a calculated insult from the Welsh and was in the end persuaded to head back home in dudgeon. Bran sent his best messengers to attempt to sway Mathelwch. He sent with them a stick of solid silver, as tall as himself and as thick as a finger, along with a plate made of gold, the circumference of his face. He also offered to replace every horse maimed and begged Mathelwch to see his family dilemma. Bran could not execute his own brother. He begged to meet with the Irish king face to face so that he might make a humble apology. The two kings meet again. However, during the meeting Mathelwch expressed his feeling that Bran's compensation was too small. Bran could not stand for that, so he offered Mathelwch a magic black cauldron that could bring the dead back to life on the condition they could not speak. Mathelwch was astounded by this great gift, and forgot all unpleasantries that had come before. The next morning the fleet of 13 ships left for Ireland with Branwen and Mathelwch side by side. Bran led all his armies down the shore to Ireland. From the shore Mathelwch's swineherds saw an awesome sight, an entire landscape it seemed moving towards Ireland. They soon saw Bran wading through the water ahead of the fleet since no ship could carry him. The Irish ran across the river Shannon and barred the way from the sea, so that no ships could travel up the river. Just before Bran's troops landed, they saw that the Irish had destroyed the bridge and blocked the river. At that moment Bran said the man who would lead his people must first become a bridge. Then he positioned himself across the flow so that his troops could march across. Mathelwch's men, seeing the Welsh advance successfully, say they will atone for the injustice done to Branwen by ensuring the kinship of Bran's nephew Gwyn. That alone did not satisfy Bran, so they offered to build him a house that would accommodate his massive body. Bran only accepted after Branwen's plea, for she feared bloodshed. The house the Irish built, however, was a clever trick, as they hid 100 soldiers inside bags throughout the home, instructed to jump out at the feast and kill the nearest Welshman. They did not, however, factor in Efnisian, who arrived at the house to inspect it, obviously expecting foul play. He went around and crushed the skull of every man hidden inside a bag. Soon after, the great feast took place and Gwyn went around, charming his newfound relatives from Wales. Efnisian complained the boy had not greeted him, and then suddenly grabbed the boy by his heels and cast him headfirst into the huge fire. Branwen, in a craze, tried to leap into the fire. Bran stopped her, knowing she would die too. He then protected his sister from the fight that broke out, escorting her outside the house. The Welsh had the advantage until the Irish brought out their secret weapon, the black cauldron that could reanimate the dead. Efnisian, seeing the great trouble he brought his countrymen, he decided upon one last act of valor. He hid himself in the bodies of the fallen Irish. When the cauldron attendants came along and threw him in, he spread his body out in all directions, shattering the cauldron, but sacrificing himself in the process. During the great fight, Bran took a fatal blow to the foot, and as he lay in his deathbed, he gave his men these last instructions: "Cut my head off and take it to London. Eventually you must bury it in the state on the White Hill of London," thought to be the location where the Tower of London now stands, turning my head towards France. Ceremonially they cut off Bran's head and left Ireland. When they returned to Wales and Branwen had time to contemplate all that had happened, she died there on the spot of a broken heart. The men buried her where she fell and continued on their quest for London. According to the Welsh triads, Bran's head was buried in London, where the White Tower now stands. As long as it remained there, Britain would be safe from invasion. However, King Arthur dug up the head, declaring the country would be protected only by his great strength. 6. There have been attempts in modern times to link the still current practice of keeping ravens at the Tower of London under the care of yeoman warder Ravenmaster with this story of Bran, whose name means crow. Several scholars have noted similarities between Brân the Blessed and the Arthurian character, the Fisher King, the keeper of the Holy Grail. The Fisher King first appears in Chrétien de Troyes' 12th century French romance Percival. The story of the Grail. He has been dealt a mortal wound in the leg. Bran's wound was in his foot, but stays alive in his mystical castle due to the effects of the Grail, waiting to be healed by Percival. A later author who took up the story, Robert de Boron, describes the history of the Grail in ancient times, and says the first Fisher King was a man called Bran. Additionally, the Welsh story Peredur son of Efrigi, a version of the Percival story with several striking deviations, features the hero visiting a mysterious castle, although he does not find the Grail there, but rather a severed human head. Additionally, some works attribute to the Grail the power to restore the fallen, making it somewhat similar to Bran's cauldron. Others have identified Bendigeidfran with the Irish hero Bran mac Feeble. John T. Koch proposes a number of parallels between the mythological Bendigeidfran and the historical Celtic chieftain Brennus, who invaded the Balkans in the 3rd century BC. He goes on to suggest an association between Bran and Brancaster, a fort on the Norfolk coast, while Rachel Brumich suggests that Castel de Nasbran in Denbighshire is similarly related. 7 Count Nikolai Tolstoy proposes that Bran's original function was that of a psychopomp, guiding the souls of the dead to the other world. Bran is praised in the poetry of 12th century bard Sindel W. Brydeed Mla, in which he is described as a good commander of the host in battle, in hostile territory, in the contest in stress, while in his elegy for Llywelyn ap Gruffydd, Prince of Wales, Bleddyn Farddy compares the overthrow of the prince to the deaths of Llywelyn Fla, King Arthur and Bran. A poem found in the Black Book of Carmarthen refers to Bendigeidfran's death in Ireland, claiming that Gwynebnud was present at the battle, either as a warrior or in his traditional role as a psychopomp. The Welsh mythological texts of the Mabinogion were recorded between the 14th and 15th centuries in Middle Welsh. As a result, there are discrepancies regarding the spelling of names, because English translations maintain Middle Welsh orthography whereas modern Welsh versions use Modern Welsh orthography. In Middle Welsh there was some variation on the name Bran. In Modern Welsh the Treiglad Medal soft mutation is Fran, but in Middle Welsh documents this might be rendered as Fran or Uran, the latter arising because U and V represented the same letter in Latin. In the Mabinogion, the character is referred to virtually exclusively as Bendigeidfran, that is, with the epithet Bendigeid, blessed or praiseworthy attached. A terminal D is pronounced similarly to T in Welsh and in early documents was also spelt with T. The only exceptions are in the patronymic of his son Caradog ap Bran, and a single reference to his gathering in Ireland as Gwyd Bran, the feast of Bran or Crow. This usage is followed in the Welsh triads. Bendigeidfran becomes Bendigeidfran or Bran Fendiged in Modern Welsh. Bendigeidfran is the form used in many modern Welsh adaptations of the Mabinogion.